The Flower Shop. Chapter 3. Transfers. Read by Paige Lindsay. Hermione awoke with the sun and prepared for the day. She decided to walk to work, not wanting to apparate. It was a fine spring day, and she smiled seeing colours finally tint the leaves on the trees and begin to see buds on the branches. When she got to her office, she was taken aback to find Nikolai sat in the chair in front of her desk. "Nikolai, what can I do for you?" she asked in a confused tone. He didn't appear to have any injuries, so she couldn't think of why he had come. "I have bad news," he replied in English. Hermione nodded, beckoning him to continue. "I am to leave," he said in a small voice, looking down at her with puppy dog eyes, pouting his already large lips at her. "Ah, where are you going?" she asked him in a slightly confused voice, unsure why he was coming to her first hand to relay the information. "To Ireland," he sighed loudly and dramatically. Hermione had to fight every urge in her body not to roll her eyes. She knew now that he was begging for sympathy, and she was determined to deny him. "I am sure that you will find Ireland to your liking. I have heard that they have a lovely training ground." She smiled at him, and he narrowed his eyes at her ever so slightly, obviously frustrated. "I will be away from you. This makes me sad," he said with a grief that she could tell was fake. "I am sure you shall enjoy yourself, and you shall have a very competent mediwitch there. Now, if you will excuse me." She stood, wanting him out of her office. When he caught her by the waist, she had to bite down on every instinct to slap him. "Do I not get a kiss to take with me?" he asked coyly. Hermione felt herself vibrate with rage. "No, and if you do not take your hand off of me, I will hex you to Ireland myself," she said in a calm, low tone. He laughed at her, mocking her threat before waltzing out of her office. Viktor had spent the entire night dreaming of the fond memories he had with Miss Granger, from their times in the library to when he had awkwardly asked her to the Yule Ball, his English failing him. He awoke in turmoil. He was utterly happy that she was so close, so accessible, and yet she wasn't whilst he was on loan. As Viktor apparated to the island training camp, he hoped that he would be transferred back to Vratsa as soon as possible, and as if the coach at Ireland had heard him, Seamus called Viktor in for a meeting. "Now, Viktor," he began in the accent that Viktor always found so difficult to comprehend. "You know how we've loved having you play here and all, but now we've got a new lad seeking, and you know he's mighty good. So we're sending you back to the Vultures. They're dying for you back, and we're swapping you for Nikolai. We need a strong beater to show these pansies how real men play." Seamus laughed loudly, and Viktor joined in, not quite understanding the joke, but in sheer disbelief and joy that he was going to be training in Vratsa again, wearing the Vulture colours and being so close to a certain mediwitch. They shook hands and departed. Although not being able to understand the man, Viktor had grown very fond of the gruff Irishman. However, he had to admit he was happy to see the back of Ireland as he apparated home to enjoy his day off. Hermione had been slightly worried by the amount of injuries she had to treat after lunch. Ivan had come in with a swollen ankle, Sergei had 2 broken fingers, and a few others had come in harbouring aches and pains. Hermione felt very unsteady when their stories all followed the same structure. "Nikolai's just in a bad mood," Sergei had said. "He doesn't like it when women reject him. He gets angry," Ivan had whispered in perfect English, looking shy and embarrassed. Hermione decided that she liked Ivan very much, being one of the only players that didn't attempt to flirt with her. After the influx of injuries, she decided she would be very happy to see the back of Nikolai. Viktor had found it hard to entertain himself on his day off. He had read for a short while, taken a long bath, followed by a nap, and then cooked himself a very large lunch. However, by the late afternoon he found himself very bored. He remembered what his mother had told him to do when he had last seen her. "Go and see Miss Laguna when you have the chance, Viktor. She is a lonely woman, and she misses your company since you have been in Ireland." Feeling a visit to the woman's flower shop would not go amiss, Viktor collected his wand and tucked it into his light summer wrap before heading out into Vratsa town. He wondered how many times Hermione had walked these streets, and he pondered on whether she had been given a tour of the city, hoping that she hadn't so that he could do the honours. He felt his fist clench ever so slightly when he thought of how Nikolai had spoken about Hermione. He wondered if the other players fawned over her like he had, and the thought conjured a low burning rage that he was not sure he was entitled to feel. Hermione had started a new book that day in the flower shop. However, she couldn't keep her mind from straying to Mr. Krum. She had thought that their time together had been like a fairy tale, plucked from a book, and now that she looked back on it, it was. Viktor had treated her better than any man in her life, and her vague feelings that she had once felt for Ron were eclipsed by what she had felt for the Durmstrang boy when he had visited that year. She smiled to herself as she thought of his soft smile that he reserved only for her, and the way that he could never pronounce her name correctly, his tongue stumbling over the strange English sounds. Just as she was pondering on her times with the star Quidditch player, the bell at the door rang and her eyes fell upon the customer entering the shop.